make things concrete. But
Sure.
it's not really, God's laws aren't concrete. Because loving people is different for everybody depending on what situation you're in. Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who don't want to just survive and instead want to thrive. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband Evan.
Hello.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today on this wonderful Tuesday. As you guys know, today we are talking about simplicity, and since it's Tuesday, we're talking about surrender.
Yeah, this has been an interesting topic for me. I mean, we just started yesterday, but really, I like it, I think. And I don't know how much I've really thought about keeping things intentionally simple, although maybe I have. I don't know. I don't like it when things get overly complicated. I know that.
Yeah.
Seems like a good value.
I think nobody likes it when it's overly complicated,
Yeah.
but I think everybody's definition of overly complicated is different.
Yeah, like you and I.
Why would you say that?
There's got to be an easier way to do some of this stuff. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. I mean, I don't think the Christian life, I don't think God's designed it to be this complicated, thing. I think the church makes things more complicated than they really need to be. And different
Right.
churches kind of have their different brand of complicated. But I don't think the Christian life really has to be like that.
Makes me think about the Pharisees, how Jesus said that they, put stumbling blocks in men's way and tithed their spices, but didn't have a heart full of love.
Right. Yeah, these things that God is paying attention to is different than what the Pharisees are paying attention to. They're paying attention to spices, and God's like, where's the love in your heart?
Right. Well, and I think when you look at the Pharisees' rules, some of those get pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like regulating how far you can walk on the Sabbath and not have it be work, what you can have in your clothing or what you can carry or not carry. I'm trying to make things concrete. But
Sure.
It's not really, God's laws aren't concrete. Because loving people is different for everybody depending on what situation you're in. And it depends on the other person. Something that may be loving for one person may not be loving for the other person. And since we're talking about addiction, kind of from this book, the Addiction and Grace book, sometimes the loving thing to do with an addict is to turn him into the police.
Yeah.
Or putting your foot down and confronting them. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's always the loving thing to do with everyone all the time. I think as humans, we want that concrete, here's exactly how to handle any situation.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a handful of scenarios. They'll apply to everything you'll come across from now on, and that's just not it.
Right.
Yeah.
So we want the simplicity of having everything concrete. But what God gives us instead is the simplicity of, love.
Yeah.
Regardless of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I think, God in his wisdom, he hasn't laid out in the Bible, every possible situation you'll ever be in. And here's exactly what to do, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't work, really.
Well, I'm sure he could have done it, but it would have made the Bible ridiculously unwieldy.
Yes. So to the listeners, the way to think about it, how simple or how complicated we've made things, I wonder, is just to look at our life and see, am I growing in grace and peace? Have I grown much since I became a Christian? I guess this may be more questions to see if there is a system in place for growth.
Right.
And what kind of a system is it? I mean, sometimes I think we don't grow because maybe we have a system in place, but it's convoluted. And, if it's I get up at 4 a.m. and I pray for 3 hours, and then, you have all these things where you're
you just don't ever do it.
And that's what real saints do, don't they? And if I can't do it, then I'm not
doing
gonna.
anything.
Yeah, some introspection here might be good. And am I surrendering to God's leading in my life, or am I trying to sort it out on my own? I think if we're trying to sort it out on our own, we're going to end up with a really complicated, really
Stressful,
impossible to follow.
Stress-inducing.
Yeah, and it's gonna, it's weird that way. We'd think if we had to make the system, we'd make it easy on ourselves. But look what the Pharisees did, like you just said. I think they were trying to be holy.
Right.
And it ended up being this really messed up thing.
I think, too, a lot of the time we know what we should do. we just don't like the simple answers,
Yeah.
the easy answers. We
Right.
want it to be more complicated. Sort of like Naaman when he came to Elisha and says, he had leprosy. One of his slave girls was an Israelite, and she was like, "Oh, there's a prophet in Israel that could heal you." And so he goes to see him, and he's like, and Elisha tells him to go wash in the river, and he's like, "No."
We've got rivers back home I could wash in.
Right. He's just like, that's not a good enough answer because he wants something,
Tell me to
something
bring
more.
100 rams for a sacrifice, and I'll do that.
But dunk myself in the river Jordan 3 times? No.
Yeah. I think maybe that's where some of this distinction is. Like, God's commands are simple, but then we don't understand why that? Why wash in the Jordan?
Right.
Or like when God called Abraham, go leave your family and go live somewhere. I'll tell you where later. And it's
Right.
all you got to do is say yes. It's very simple. But then it's like we automatically start thinking, okay, well, how is this actually going to work? And how am I going to,
Right.
how is this going to be okay?
Or
And
I
that's
think,
the complicated part.
yeah, well, and I think sometimes we go down that path because we don't want to say yes. We're like trying to explore any other options that there might be, to be like, no, really, there's something else that I could do. Or
Here's why this won't work, God.
right. Or we downplay the problem. We pretend like it's not that big of a deal. And so then we don't need to follow through on the solution. I think that's easy to do too. My concrete example is going to bed on time.
Okay.
Like we've already talked about on the show that is one of the hallmarks of surrender, like
Is resting
God
when you're supposed to
says-
rest.
Yeah, God talks a lot about that. I think it's Psalm 127 where it says, "In vain you rise up early, in vain you stay up late, for the Lord gives sleep to his beloved."
Yeah.
And it's really hard not to burn the candle at both ends because we got a lot going on right now.
Yeah. And it's all, we feel like part of our calling, right? God's given us our children. We have my job, we have your job, your writing job, and now the podcast, and it's all very important. And
Right.
it seems like some of the best way to get everything done is to just sleep 3 or 4 hours a night.
Right, but it's not.
That's right. That's our wisdom and our understanding of the situation.
Right, and we know when we get out of that, when we start trying to do it on our own strength and in our own way, we're getting out of the slipstream, we're making everything harder, we're building houses of straw instead of things that will last.
Yeah.
So we don't want to do that. But I know that one of the things that's helped me is to say, okay, let's amplify this problem a little bit. What's going to happen in 5 years if we don't change? If we just stay up late anyway?
Yeah.
Oh, well, 5 years from now we're going to...
We'll get sick.
Right, we're going to have some pretty severe health problems. And then I think, too, looking at what this is costing us, that's been really helpful for me. Kind of the opportunity cost. Okay, so yes, I stay up late, I get work done. The work is not my best, but it's done.
Right.
But it's not my best. And then I'm costing myself the opportunity to be energetic and present the next day. Instead, I'm dragging and cranky and...
Yeah, it's tough. Because we know, at least we know some of, what God's values are, and we want to align with that. And he puts a huge value on, having good relationships. And like you said, he talks about sleeping and resting and in our spiritual disciplines. And if we're all just like, well, yeah, I know that's important, but, this other thing's really important too. I don't know, somehow in the saying yes to God, he provides a way to do it in a more balanced way, obviously, because that's what he called us to do.
Right.
And then through prayer and more surrender, it's like, well, maybe that's not really what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Obviously, I can't, I'm hitting a limit here.
Right.
I'm skipping all my meals and I'm not sleeping. So is this really what I'm supposed to be doing?
Right.
Or am I at this pace or what's the percent wise, am I giving too much emphasis on this one thing or whatever? But
I think it takes a lot of prayer and just taking things one thing at a time. So if you're avoiding saying yes to something for whatever reason, asking yourself, what will this look like in 5 years if I keep doing what I'm doing? And what's the opportunity cost? What is this preventing me from doing now? They're pretty helpful.
We want a system to grow and change. We want to understand that, spiritual maturity and development doesn't just happen automatically over the passage of time. We need to be intentional.
Right.
But we don't have to get too complicated.
We can all pray and read our Bibles and ask the Lord to give us love for Him and love for others. It's not that hard.
Yeah, when you say it like that.
All right. We love you guys, and we are praying for you. We hope that you guys have an awesome Tuesday and that you choose to make it an awesome Tuesday, because every day we have a choice whether this is going to be an epic day or a cranky or to be miserable.
Yeah.
So pick whether your glass is half full or half empty, and then hang on to that today.
Look for things.
Unless you pick that it's half empty, in which case,
Don't
pick again. Don't hang on to it all day.
Yeah, and look for things to surrender to God to and to say yes to and trust Him for how's that actually going to work.
Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show and listening to the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. And if you haven't signed up for our email subscription list yet, you should do that. Pretty excited about it right now.
It's on our webpage, epiceverydaynow.com. It's pretty easy to find. You just go there and start scrolling down, and the little email thing pops up. So it's pretty handy.
Yep.
We'll keep you in touch. We're going to be sending out at least weekly emails, and be good. We can stay in a little bit better touch that way.
Come back tomorrow, and we're going to keep talking about simplicity and how to stay centered in the middle of that.
See you then.
Bye.